I want to get into a little bit into fencing, and I guess I want to start with the bottom, which is so first of all, these are my views. This is my philosophy that I grew up with. Those who don't know, my father is a fencing coach. All my family is somehow involved with fencing. My daughter's godfather is a épée fencer. I'm pretty proud to say this. He's like a 3-time world champion across different age categories. You know, I teach my daughters that, hey, you know, your godfather is something special. So they have to live up to it. Okay, the way the arm works. So this is something I teach quite often because I think it's the easiest thing to improve upon. Like if you want your fencing to get better, simple answer, and it's kind of obviously stupid answer, get better at hitting, okay? Like that's flat out. You want to get better and win more, you gotta hit more, you gotta hit better, okay? So the first concept that you want to keep in mind is hitting through the target, okay? So a lot of times we looking at the opponent as like a series of dots, if you could imagine. So I don't know, if you could imagine like a laser point or a gun with a laser point, right? There's just a dot that we're looking to aim through and hit. So sometimes a big mistake, people are literally just trying to like kind of poke and pull out. I say you want to hit in such a way that it would quote unquote penetrate through the person, not necessarily too far. You don't want to overshoot, but you want to go through it. But more importantly, I don't want you guys to look at the opponent, at the target as a dot, but rather as a line, okay? And I know it's a little strange, but for example, if I'm looking to hit on the arm and I'm always fixating just one little dot on the bicep, then that's where I'll be going through. It's great if I hit it, not so good if I miss. What I suggest is that forget about focusing on a particular little dot. I always visualize a line straight across the arm to the shoulder. Anywhere on that line is great, anywhere. Now, there's some spots on this arm that will be easier to get and some will be tougher to get, right? So for example, anything closer to the bell guard, right here, obviously, this will be tougher to get. However, if we enter with a super shallow angle over here and just drag our tip across, depending, if you put a decent amount of power at the right time, you might start getting some clicks right around here. If not, you're still eventually gonna glide out to the bicep, maybe get something earlier. Our job is to win any possible millisecond, right? So that's the idea of driving through the target. So that way, it actually, besides the point of like sending the weapon correctly, it will save you time on decision making. So if you always just drive always through that line, and it's not so important for you of the little particulars. Oh, am I getting the right angle? Am I getting the right position? My fingers working? No, you're just always making the same hit, so we're improving our consistency on the touch there. Okay? To go along with that, those of you that take lessons with me, you heard this millions of times. Alan, right? 12 o'clock position. This is something, a concept that I've been drumming about to a lot of people. So the idea of it is that try to make all the hits and make sure that your tip always comes in over here through 12 o'clock, right, on a bell guard. So if your tip should be always coming in through here. Try to avoid entering your opponent on the side, over here, or especially below. Obviously, there's some times when it is acceptable, and not that I'm saying like you could still use it in a bout and score points with it, but something to keep in mind that if you always drive your tip right through 12 o'clock, you win in positioning. So you're always going to be above your opponent. There's a higher likelihood, I guess, the opponent will slip down and you'll be able to get over top. So you gaining the higher position is always beneficial. Thinking of any warfare in general, right? You always have the army is trying to rush to the higher ground, so that way it's more of a struggle for the other ones to come up. This is kind of the same concept. You want to keep your tip very sharp in it. Sometimes people come in with the angle, and what happens is that your bell guard no longer protects you. Okay, so if I always hit around like this, What happens if I'm in line much like so, there's nothing to really hit. My whole forearm is hitting behind the bell guard, maybe now on the shoulder. As soon as I get in a low position, much like so, or much like so, somebody that just hits directly, they can put the blade right near the bell, and at full thrust, they're gonna get a hit right on the wrist. Much like so, if I was on this side, at full thrust, there you go, they're getting a hit on the wrist. So it's actually very close. They don't have to work very hard. It's just a matter of hitting the target at that point in time. But if we're at 12 o'clock, right in line, we're much more protected by the bell guard. Okay? So kind of the idea behind the hit there, the metaphor that I always use is a metaphor of a bullet from a gun. Because the biggest fear, now that if I teach you to always hit straight like this without any angle, your fear is that you're going to miss everything. Your fear is that maybe even if you won't miss, it's just going to glide right beside the target. You're not going to get anything out of it. The answer is velocity in the tip. So there's a lot of, I think Red Bull even made this commercial not so long ago, kind of, I don't know if it proves it or not, but they're making the argument that the fencing tip moves just as fast as the bullet, or maybe even faster, right? So with that in mind, if we make a super shallow angle, we're hitting right through 12 o'clock, and you maybe perhaps don't even see the target. You just know it's going to be there, obviously, because something's holding the weapon. The concern is that by the time you make all the adjustments, you're going to just fall flat. You have to figure out a way to have a strong enough thrust. If there's a lot of speed, and if you were to shoot a bullet from a gun, and the bullet was to hit a piece of cloth or a piece of paper, just a very tiny piece, much like so. Because there's so much velocity, it's still going to do damage to that little piece. Obviously, if you just, whatever, like even a big piece with a pen, you go slowly, there's nothing happens, but if I go faster, there's a much heavier and much sharper impact. So same thing with a tip. If you can get your tip down before opponent's bell guard and give a good enough thrust, even if there is like a millimeter that your tip will catch, it will still have enough thrust to click the button, right? A big mistake, in my opinion, is people thinking for how the tip wants to land on their opponent. That's kind of what I call it, is that we see a tiny little bit of target, and what we start doing is that we're trying to hit in such a way that we're going to maximize the area of the tip. So we're trying to get a hit so the tip lands flatly against the target. Well, getting to that spot compromises so many other things, right? That's especially talking about, now the bell guard is only protecting just the wrist, where all of this will be wide open at this point in time, right? So there's, in my opinion, just way too big of a trade-off. Don't try to think to land the tip flatly. Just any little micron of target you can get, just pierce through it. It doesn't take much. 750 grams at fast speed will definitely click, okay?